Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Missouri Department of Conservation's Wild Webcast on invasive plants and animals. We're going to learn a bit about the threats to Missouri's natural resources from, again, invasive plants and animals. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully you could hear us well, and we're going to get going. So, my name is Joe Jarek, and I'll be your Wild Webcast host today. And we are joined by our topic expert, Angela Sokolowski. She is our invasive species coordinator here at the Department of Conservation. So thanks for being here today, Angela. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. I'm happy to be here.
And let's see, we're talking about invasive species. So let's start with what exactly is invasive and all of that stuff, terminology.
Right. We'll go through a few definitions so that everyone understands. We'll start out with native. Native species occur within a region as a result of natural processes, and they're adapted to local environmental conditions. They've co-evolved with other native species, and they're critical to ecosystem functions.
And a couple good examples we have in this picture on your left, folks, is the monarch butterfly, which is a native species, which feeds off of native milkweed. So those are two kind of intertwined native species. So then what's non-native?
So non-native is any species that was introduced to a new place or a new type of habitat. So their presence can often have negative impacts on ecosystems, but doesn't necessarily. And oftentimes people interchange these non-natives with the words exotic, alien, or introduced.
Okay, and to clarify, just because something is non-native doesn't necessarily mean it's invasive or bad. And the picture we see here in the bottom right are hosta. Now, if you're a gardener, you know hosta is a great shade plant. And I did not realize that they're not really native, but they also kind of, I mean, they don't spread that much. They're not,
That's
that
right.
terrible. So just because it's non-native doesn't mean it's invasive. Let's figure out those definitions.
Okay.
So as we move to the next slide, we'll see a little bit about that.
So next we have aggressive, and these are any species that spread rapidly and can outcompete other species. They can be non-native or native, and they may be aggressive in certain situations, but not other situations.
Okay, and the plant we have there, is that a sumac?
It is. It's a smooth sumac, and I think a lot of folks will recognize that along some roadsides, there are huge clusters of native sumac. And so it can be kind of aggressive, right? It can kind of dominate an area that it's in, but it isn't necessarily fully invasive.
Okay, so let's jump to the kind of topic at hand. And here we have invasive, and that looks like thistle.
That is thistle.
But it's not native.
Correct. That's a non-native invasive thistle. And the definition of invasive are species that are aggressive, they're not native, and their presence cause or is likely to cause harm to the environment, economy, and or human health. And these species very often grow, reproduce, and spread rapidly.
Right, and that's the big problem with invasive species, because as we said, they don't really have any natural kind of controls. Things that eat them, hunt them, kill them, keep them under control. So that's why they tend to grow, reproduce, and spread rapidly. All right, so again, we ask, why should I care? What's the big deal?
Well, invasive species are among the leading threats to native wildlife. Invasives are the second most significant threat to biodiversity, second only to habitat loss. And approximately 42% of the threatened or endangered species are at risk due to invasive species.
Okay, so it really is a big threat. In some of these pictures, let's go over that and kind of really quickly see why it's a threat to these species. So that's a dragonfly in the top.
Right, that's one of the endangered species here in Missouri, the Heinz emerald dragonfly.
And that's a darter, I believe.
It is. It's a Nangua darter, which is also an endangered species here.
And we have the greater prairie chicken, which is very endangered and limited to just some prairie remnants in northwest Missouri.
Right. And then we've got a gray wolf, and all of these are endangered. They have really specific habitat needs, and invasive species can alter those habitats and make life even harder for these species that are having a hard time getting by.
Right, and to clarify, we know we don't have a a wolf population in Missouri. So nationally, 42% of threatened or endangered species are at risk from invasive species. So it is a big deal, and let's learn more. So again, they affect wildlife and stuff. How do they affect me? How do they affect us?
Right. More on the everyday life level. Invasive species for the average person can diminish hunting or fishing or recreational opportunities. They're very capable of killing trees on private property. They can reduce the bird species that people enjoy seeing at their bird feeder. They can easily take over flower beds or gardens or fields. And in a lot of cases, they can end up raising taxes.
Let's dig into this a little bit more, how it affects us as your really average folks. So diminishing hunting and fishing and recreational opportunities. If invasive species really outcompete native, say fish, it's going to ruin fishing, or some game species, that impacts our hunting. Or even if we're out hiking, if a native plant is taking over an area, that reduces our recreational enjoyment, right?
Yeah, if an invasive plant is.
Yeah.
And there are other kind of indirect factors to hunting or fishing. If your favorite hunting spot gets grown in with an invasive bush and you can no longer see through the
Right.
field or through the woods to sight the deer or the turkey that you're hunting. And in the same right, if you're fishing in a lake that is completely choked out with invasive plants in that lake, you're no longer very apt to successfully hunt or fish in those areas.
Right, and you mentioned killing trees on your property. Folks, we'll get into it a little bit more, but I think that's an ash tree, and a big invasive species is the emerald ash borer. So it can cost you money to have them removed. And then for our, hundreds of thousands of bird watchers out there, you said they could reduce bird species. Now that picture, those are European starlings. So this time of year, you may see those huge, huge swarms of blackbirds, essentially. Those are European starlings, and they hit us in massive numbers and just can take over a bird feeder.
Right. They will empty a bird feeder really quickly.
All right, and then the bottom picture, we'll talk about these more too. They're zebra mussels, and that shows how they could just literally clog pipes for water treatment and other things. So all of these things cost money to treat, and a lot of times that's tax dollars, right?
Exactly.
All right. So let's see how they invade.
So because they're in a new environment, free from natural predators or parasites or competitors, they really often develop these large population sizes really quick because they're out of context and they don't have other elements of the ecosystem keeping them in check, right? So these high populations, they can outcompete, displace, or kill native species, or just reduce wildlife food and habitat.
And as we'll see some of these plant examples, it's just not good food for wildlife.
So often that's the case. Our native species did not evolve consuming these plants, and they don't recognize it as a food source, or it's not a valuable food source. Right. And so they might be a field full of plants, but there aren't any wildlife species that want to eat it.
Right, and that goes the same with our bodies of water. So as we see the next point.
Right. So some of these species have the potential to disrupt really vital ecosystem functions, including water flow, nutrient cycling, or soil decomposition. And when those ecosystem functions get changed, everything has to react after that. It's a massive shift.
And again, the tax dollars, the economic damage.
Right.
That gets into the billions and billions of dollars on a national, even state level, because these things cost an incredible amount of money. As a consumer, as a state agency, as a private conservation organization to combat them, it's a lot of work.
It is.
And they don't just suddenly happen and boom, it's a process. So why don't you explain this chart to us a little bit?
Okay, this chart explains the general invasion curve. And at the lower left in the green, we have an introduction, whether that's a plant or an insect or an animal that's an invasive species. It arrives in a new place and starts reproducing at a relatively slow rate. And as time goes by, it starts reproducing more and more quickly, kind of an exponential curve.
Yeah, there's nothing, again, keeping it in check.
Exactly. And so when it first arrives, it may not be familiar to us, or we may not realize that it actually is invasive and is outcompeting elements of our natural habitat. And eventually we detect it. And as it is reproducing, these populations are growing. It almost becomes ubiquitous on the landscape, or just more familiar on the landscape. And that's generally when public awareness begins. And by that time, we have such large populations that treatment becomes expensive, and it's really hard to rein these populations back in. And so the earlier we can detect an invasive species, the more feasible it is to actually control them and eradicate them. The more time passes, the harder that becomes, the more expensive, and the more resources it takes to actually make a difference to decrease those populations.
Right, so we want to kind of get that jump start and start as early as possible with prevention, and then get into the early detection and try to avoid management, which is the most difficult and expensive part. So prevention, how can we prevent this?
Prevention is the easiest and the most affordable way to deal with invasive species. And it starts with being intentional about species that we choose to bring here, or plant in our yards, or bring into our lives. And so not choosing invasive species is the first step. And the alternative option is to buy native plants when it comes to landscaping and gardening. Then another form of prevention is anytime we recreate or spend time outdoors, we should be cleaning shoes, our gear, vehicles, and equipment before we leave that area, so that any seeds or any sort of invasive hitchhikers that we may have picked up unintentionally in our recreation, we leave there and we don't transport them to a next place. And then there's always not releasing plants or animals. Some folks will adopt an exotic pet or fish or plants that go with aquariums, and they decide that they no longer want to home those animals. They may be well-intended, wanting to release them into nature, but honestly, those animals will suffer, and it is a really unwise decision to release them in case they become invasive. And so we recommend folks never release animals or plants.
Right, and one of the common things that people do is if they have aquariums, and if they have plants or animals in the aquarium and they maybe don't want it, or they're outgrowing it, they'll think, well, I'll be a good person and just go dump it in the creek out back. Worst thing you could ever do. So when it comes to aquariums, we really encourage people never dump them out. What can they do instead?
They can try to rehome their aquarium or their exotic pets. There are websites for rehoming. They can also contact a local pet store who may be able to help them find a new home for those creatures. And in the case of especially aquarium plants, we ask that they throw those plants away. Don't flush them. You want those plants to die and not make it to another water source. So you can put them in a Ziploc bag in the freezer, or you can throw them dry into the garbage. Just don't release them live.
Right, and a key thing for any gardeners out there, never ever put these invasive plants in your compost, because some of those seeds could still stay alive and spread in that way. So it may be a good intention, but don't even put them in your compost, put them in the trash. So, and when you say kind of clean your shoes and gear, this isn't real intensive. It's as simple as like shaking out your tent or your clothes, hitting your shoes to get any dirt off the soles, your bicycle tires, things like that before you leave an area.
Yes, it's just a general tidying up. If you've got seeds on you, or mud or dirt clods, or just any sort of natural fragments, leave them where you picked them up.
All right, and then early detection and rapid response, know how to identify them and then try to stop them. And then management, we're going to get into that because that's the toughest part.
Right.
So as far as identifying them, the Missouri Invasive Plant Council, who's a partner with us.
They are.
They have great resources. Tell us more about this.
They really do. They've compiled lists of invasive species in the state of Missouri, the invasive plants in the state of Missouri, and made several lists. They have a top 25 statewide invasive plants, and they also have a top 25 expanding plants. And those are the big coming in or really expanding and taking over sort of species. And if every citizen knew how to identify those and knew that they should be taking care of those when they could, we'd be making some headway. So the only way to detect something is to know what it looks like.
So for plants, we encourage folks to Google the Missouri Invasive Plant Council or use that link there. And there is a ton of information on invasive plants, how to identify them and what we could do about it. So that's a great source of information. A quick question now, folks, we're getting into our top 10 list of invasives.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about a big one right now, but we got a question from one of our viewers. Are the mimosa trees invasive?
Yes, mimosa trees are invasive. They're one of those horticultural species that are sold because they're very beautiful. They bloom wonderful colors and folks seem to enjoy them aesthetically, but they are very prone to spreading in the woodlands.
Right.
And we're seeing more and more mimosas completely out of a landscaping context. And so they are invasive.
Okay, so one of our biggest invasive trees as far as problems now are the callery pear tree.
Yes.
And those are the ones that you see blooming along the highways this time of year. They're the first tree really to throw out those white blossoms.
They are. And I wanted to start with this species because it is very visible through most of the state right now. It's known by several names. Callery pear, Bradford pear are the big, most common names, but in stores, it's often sold as Cleveland Select, White House, Aristocrat, and Autumn Blaze. It's very commonly sold because it does bloom early. It has beautiful foliage in the fall, but those blossoms are stinky. These trees smell bad.
That is true. I have never planted them, but around my house there are some, and they smell like cat pee. They're pretty, but they are stinky.
They are. And the
Seriously.
other real downside to this tree, besides just its general invasiveness, is that they're very weak wood, and they're prone, once they're a decent size, they will break and snap off major branches during windstorms.
Yes, so that's a big problem too. And we have a question from Ben who's saying, if there's such a problem, why do they still sell them? And we know that nurseries, garden centers, things like that do sell these, unfortunately, and some other invasive plants.
They do. And there are a few states around the country that have made it illegal to sell callery pear in those states. We are hoping that at some point Missouri would have similar legislation, because we definitely support that. It's so easy for folks to pick up these trees at a garden center or a big box store, not realizing that this is a very unwise choice for natural habitats. So in the meantime, because we can't control which plants are sold in Missouri, we're trying to get the word out and educate folks so that they can make a smart decision when they go to buy landscaping trees.
Right, this ties back to our previous slides where prevention is key. And again, we don't have really the regulatory authority to control what garden centers and things sell. So we ask people to educate yourself, be aware, prevent buying them, know what trees and things are natives. So we also have a question that somebody wants to really buy native plants for their property. Do the big box stores, do the nurseries really have a good selection, or are there some other sources?
There are other sources, and Grow Native is a fantastic nonprofit here in Missouri that has a list of retailers and seed growers and nurseries here in the state that provide a great variety of native plants for purchase. So I recommend that you go to grownative.org and check out their resources on where you can buy native around the state.
Yeah, and some of the big box stores and nurseries and things do have some native species. So again, educate yourself, read the tags,
Yep.
make sure you're buying native. So if you have callery pear trees, what can people do about them?
Well, first off, don't buy them, don't plant them on your property, please. If you do have them, we highly recommend that you cut them down and that you treat the stumps with herbicide so that they don't re-sprout. And the best thing you can do is replace them with native trees. Some of our natives are really great alternatives like flowering dogwood, serviceberry, wild plum, and there are others.
Right, Angela, you mentioned one of the big problems with callery pears too is that top photo, the limbs will snap in windstorms.
Right.
And I've seen that too often. And then the bottom picture is what we're seeing this time of year as you drive along the highway. All of those white blossoming trees are the invasive callery pear. So you could see how they just spread. And this is spread. Birds eat the berries or the little fruits, and they just then drop them. And before you know it, they can take over.
Yes, they are being distributed across the landscape.
All right. So as far as if you have a callery pear, we encourage you to cut them down. And if you do that, we also are working with, again, the Missouri Invasive Plant Council for a callery pear buyback that's happening this spring.
Correct. They have done this awesome program for several years now. You have to register. And if you follow this website, you can register for the callery pear buyback. You commit to cutting down a callery pear tree that's on your property, and you will send them photographic proof that you did, and then you will be eligible to receive a free native tree to replace that callery pear. And the buyback events, you have to register now, but the buyback events where they will distribute those natives to folks who've registered will happen on April 18th at 9 different locations across the state.
All right, so again, folks, you can visit this website or Google the Missouri Invasive Plant Council.
Yes.
And then search for callery pear buyback. So this is a good incentive. And again, we remind you, if you have any questions, please share them through the chat box on the right side of your screen. So another tiny but huge problem.
Correct.
Are zebra mussels. Tell us more about them.
Yes, we're going to switch to the aquatic world now. Zebra mussels are fingernail-sized, black and white striped bivalve mollusks native to the Caspian Sea region of Asia.
So we could see there what they look like, and kind of that ruler shows the size. They're really just tiny, and the striping on them is what gives them their zebra name.
Correct.
And again, somebody wants to know already, can you eat them? I mean, you technically could, but they're tiny.
Edible once.
Well, that's true.
I would not recommend it.
Well, and the issue is they're tiny.
Right.
They're less than even an inch long. So the whole process and the reward is, And the problem with this, Angela, too, is not only we don't really eat them, but does anything eat them in nature?
Yes, there are fish species that will eat them, but not to the extent that they will actually control the population.
Right. They're still just expanding exponentially compared to kind of what fish eat them. So let's learn a little bit more. So where they come from? Where are they? What's going on?
Okay, well, they first were discovered in the U.S. in 1988 in the Great Lakes off of Michigan. They started spreading from there through the waterways. And you can see on the map on the lower right, the red dots are zebra mussel occurrences in the United States. We noticed them first in Missouri in 1991 in the Mississippi River, and since then have found them in the Missouri as well as other reservoirs.
And again, as an invasive species, they came over here in the ballast of large ships from the Caspian Sea, do we say?
Right.
And then when ships dump their ballast, they evidently get in the water, and then they naturally spread and become a huge problem. So let's see, again, the life cycle.
Right. This is something I really want folks to understand. The mussels themselves are quite small, and when they're reproductive, they release eggs into the water column. And these eggs are 2/1000th of an inch in size, and those eggs develop into larvae called veligers. And there's a microscopic photo of a villager in the lower right that shows that that size is the equivalent to the diameter of a human hair.
So we'll never be able to see this.
It is undetectable to the naked eye. And so the water column can be full of these little eggs and veligers, and any small amount of water may or may not contain them. You can't tell, you can't see them.
Right. And now the big issue is the mussels themselves attach to something. So they stay put. However, the veligers, those are just in the water. So if you unintentionally even move your boat or equipment from a body of water, it could have these tiny little things in there that you take to another body of water.
That's correct. Right? That's the scary part of how easy these are to transmit. So you may think that because you can't see zebra mussels on your boat or on your gear, it doesn't mean that these veligers aren't in the water from the lake.
They're already in a lot of waterways. And, you know, we talked as far as tax dollars and the financial impact on us. So that's a boat propeller. You could see how they can just really ruin your boat, your boating equipment, things like that.
Yes, and they will get into the intake on your motor and grow within those tiny little channels where the coolant water goes through. And so they can destroy a really expensive boat motor pretty quickly once they get established in there.
And not even that, they get into power plants and industrial and drinking water and just could clog it. And they also basically can kill off all the native mussels and other aquatic animals.
Again, they're out competing a lot of the natives in those systems. Yes.
Right, and they just spread, and very little, if anything, can stop them in nature.
That's right.
All right, so what can people do?
The message is pretty simple here. Anytime that you have recreated in the water, we ask that you clean, drain, and dry your equipment. And that means after every water body, every time that you move from water body to the next, and that's all boats and gear. A lot of the promotional materials show this emblem with a boat and a trailer, but it also applies to non-motorized craft like canoes and kayaks and paddle boards. So if you've got water in anything that you picked up and transferred to the next water body, you could be transporting those veligers. So clean, drain, and dry your gear.
Yes, and we got a question, do they die outside of water? Hence the dry is so important.
Yes.
Because they will die if they're exposed to sunlight and out of water, but it takes some time, doesn't it?
It does. I don't know about the veligers, but the mussels themselves can live for several weeks out of water if it's humid outside. And so
they close up and seal themselves off.
Right. They're tough little suckers.
They are. So what's an easy treatment?
The easiest treatment is a mix of vinegar and water. That vinegar will help kill them. And you also want to dry them as well. So a vinegar bath, diluted vinegar bath, and you can look up the % solution for that online.
More vinegar is always better than less.
True. Vinegar is not hard on the environment.
And unlike bleach or something like that, vinegar isn't difficult on the environment. It's not going to kill things like that, except the zebra mussels.
Right.
So rafts. So if we're floating, our rafts also need to be cleaned.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Basically, it's better to overdo it than underdo it. So anytime you're in a body of water, even fishing equipment, it's good to leave that out and dry it out or wash it off.
It is. You really just don't want that water to be sitting in something so that it's still present when you go to the next water body. If you rinse it out with the garden hose like a raft, rinse it when you get home, dry it in the sun, you should be good, but you want it totally dry.
All right, so moving along. And again, if you have questions, please share them in the chat box. But now a big invasive plant.
This one is probably familiar to most folks in Missouri because it's all over the state.
But it's also really tough to pronounce, so help us with that.
It is pronounced sericea lespedeza.
Okay, and this is one of those, you do see it along roadsides and fields. I mean, it just has taken over. And why is it such a problem? Tell us more about it.
Well, most invasive plants really take advantage of disturbance. So if the ground is disturbed, they will be the first to pull into that spot essentially and take advantage of some open soil and sunlight. This species is particularly good at that. And so we see it on roadsides quite often, especially where the roads get graded or mowed and disturbed in some other way.
Okay. And we were talking before this, the origin of this is kind of fascinating because it was originally brought to the United States like during or after the Dust Bowl.
We brought a lot of what are now invasive plants here following the Dust Bowl when we lost just feet of soil, topsoil, and we were frantically looking for plants that would grow quickly and hold the soil down. And so this is one of those that was promoted for erosion control and forage. And it's a legume, which means it's a nitrogen fixer, which sometimes is a soil amendment that folks are looking for on their land. And so this is one of those species that was brought here to help solve that problem at that time. And it is good at establishing and it is good at growing quickly. However, it isn't necessarily that great at holding down the soil. And it's so invasive that it is not beneficial in the overall balance of things.
Right. And so for history, a history point here, when we talked, this was brought over during and after the Dust Bowl. So that was like in the 1920s, 30s, things like that.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been recent. It's been here a long time. And often we discover too late that something has unintended consequences.
And this is a species that's still being sold as forage as well. And so this is just one that you need to be aware of.
Again,
and make a smart choice.
Right.
The impacts of having the species take over your pasture land or your back 40 probably isn't worth it in the long run.
Because it's not really good forage for agricultural.
It's not great. It gets really woody.
Yeah, or even wildlife tend really not to like it.
There are much better plants that are native out there.
Okay, and we have, real quick here, we have a slender bush clover, which is a similar looking species. That's on the right. And then we have the, again, how do you pronounce that?
Sericea lespedeza.
Okay, on the left. And there's, real quick, a couple distinction in the leaves.
Right. If you take a look at the leaves on sericea and hold it up to the light, the veins that are coming off the very center vein will always be parallel in kind of a fishbone veination, whereas the native lespedezas will have more of that loopy, channely look that are not parallel straight lines.
Okay, good to know. And again, what could we do?
Again, it's a similar message for most of these. To prevent it, you want to clean shoes and gear and equipment. And with this one, that includes mowing equipment, other agricultural implements. If this plant has gone to seed, it's very common for those seeds to hitch a ride on or in mower decks. So cleaning that equipment where you are going through sericea rather than dragging it somewhere new is really important.
Right, and they produce just literally billions of seeds.
They are.
So once they go to seed, I mean, there's a lot of seed there.
It's high seed production, and those seeds can be viable for over 10 years.
All right, so first, don't plant it.
Right.
And then if you're mowing it, clean all your stuff before you leave that area. And if necessary, it can be treated with herbicides.
Correct. A lot of times the populations get so huge that herbicide's the most efficient way to start eradicating them.
All right, so if we want to kind of hit it before it goes to seed, it's like other plants. When does it go to seed?
Okay, it's going to flower probably around July or August.
Okay, so it's summer flowering.
Yes.
And then it goes into seed late summer.
Right. So if you can mow it before or during the flowering time, it doesn't have an opportunity to go to seed.
All right, so you want to get mowing on that late spring into spring.
And through the summer as well.
Through the summer before it goes to seed. All right.
Correct.
And now moving on, we went from plants to now we're back into water and fish. Folks, I think, are probably pretty familiar. These are those big old carp that literally will jump out of the water and can hit you.
Yes, and there's 4 different species, but we lump them all together and just call them invasive carp in general. There's silver carp, big head carp, black carp, and grass carp.
Now it's the silver carp that we see here, and they are kind of when you have a motor in the water, they react to that. They think it's a threat and they escape by jumping out of the water in massive quantities. So here you could see people literally get hit with them. Let's get more into the different types of carp. Oh, before we go back, some's asking if controlled burns can help eliminate the invasive plant we just talked about.
Burns are a good tool in the toolbox, but they are usually best as a combination treatment. Burning alone is not going to eradicate sericea, but it can help burn through the thatch, and then you can catch the resprouts coming up or the new seedlings coming up and spray them when they're smaller, and you can actually hit them with herbicide more easily, or mow them more easily. So burns help, but they are not the end-all solution.
Good question. We thank you folks for sending us your questions. So let's learn a little bit more about the types of carp. And they are not attractive fish.
No, I don't believe they are.
No, those eyes are all kind of wonky.
They're not familiar to me at all. The first two species I lumped together, the silver carp and the bighead carp, because these guys have similar feeding habits. They're both planktivores, which means they eat the microscopic zooplankton, detritus, and algae that's in the water.
So the microscopic plants and even animals and stuff like that are far too small for us to see with the human eye.
Yes.
Now, a big problem with these fish is they do that. They tend to deplete the water of all of these nutrients for the native fish. So you may see the water being a lot clearer, but that's not a good thing because they're eating everything that the small native fish need to eat.
And some of the native fish that are also planktivores are paddlefish, bigmouth buffalo, and then the young of bass and crappie. And so when these invasive carp they're voracious eaters and they get big. It's not uncommon for them to be 30, 40, 50 pounds.
Wow.
And so they eat a lot, which means they are using up the resources that our native fish normally rely on.
Right, and nothing really eats them. So that's, again, their population just explodes in a body of water and ruins it for all the natives.
Yes.
All right, so the other two.
So the black carp and grass carp have different eating habits. The black carp feed primarily on snails and mussels.
Do they eat the zebra mussels?
They might, I don't know for sure.
But not enough to control them.
Right, and thankfully, we don't have as many black carp. Our big rivers are primarily infested with silver carp as the main invasive species, but we do have some black carp, but we don't want to replace one invasive with another.
Right. And then the grass carp, we know those things get like 6 feet long.
All of these carp can be very big fish. And the grass carp are primarily vegetarians. They will feed on small crustaceans and aquatic insects when they're young, but then primarily feed on plant and animal material when they're larger.
Okay, now I do know that some folks may want to get, say, grass carp for their pond or lake to clean it if there's too much algae and things like that. Not really a good idea.
They are utilized for that function. Many of the grass carp that folks can actually purchase or receive as part of pond management are genetically modified so that they won't be reproductive.
Yes, so they just eat and eat and eat and grow and grow and grow and eat what you don't want, and then they get so big that they kind of stop eating and fortunately don't reproduce. All right, so we have invasive carp is on our list. Again, what could folks do?
Well, it's important to know that invasive carp cannot be used as live bait in the state of Missouri, but you can use it as dead or cut bait. We ask that no one ever dump unused live bait, and that includes worms, crawdads, or small fish, minnows. Just don't dump it. I know folks are well intended, but again, there's no guarantee that you're not dumping something that is going to be invasive and take over. So please give it to another fisherman or dispose of it in a trash, please. And then it's also helpful if you learn to distinguish between our native gizzard shad and our silver carp. They look very similar.
And gizzard shad are a very popular bait fish.
Yes, and they're native. versus the silver carp, which look similar and are ones that we don't want dumped in other lakes and rivers.
Right, and a lot of times folks will go out with a net and try to catch their own bait fish, and they think they may have gizzard shad, but it may be silver carp. So we recommend folks clearly identify whatever you're using and don't use them as live bait.
Right. And if you are seining silver carp, don't throw them back in.
And what do folks do if they catch any of these carp? I mean, they can be good eating.
They can. We have done demonstrations at the state fair on
Yes.
how to prepare invasive carp.
Yes.
They are delicious. I've had them myself and I highly recommend it.
And I have too. They're a really great way to serve them or prepare them is kind of as nuggets and deep frying them. And they can be delicious. They're a little bony, folks. So, you know, the deep frying kind of takes care of some of that. But yeah, if you catch them, they can be good eating. All right, so moving back from the rivers and lakes and stuff into our forests, garlic is good and mustard is good, but when you put garlic and mustard together in this plant, it's not so good.
Correct. This is another invasive plant that is really good at taking over stream banks, river bottoms.
Well, in open forests and woodlands, you can see that bottom right picture. That's just all garlic mustard.
It really is. This is a biennial species, which means it lives for 2 years and it bolts up and flowers on the second year. Those flowers are really little white 4-petaled flowers, so they're pretty easy to identify. After it flowers, it puts on a seed pod, a long, slender seed pod that you can see in the lower left, which is typical of the mustard family. And let's see, let's go to the next slide.
Yes, because somebody's already asking, is it fragrant?
It is fragrant.
And it's edible.
It is. The leaves may vary a little bit, so that you might be confused as to what you're looking at, but if you're not sure, you can pinch off a leaf and smell it. It will smell exactly like garlic.
And not only does it smell like garlic, you can use it because it has a good garlic flavor.
That's correct. I have eaten garlic mustard before in lasagna, and I have seen some cool pesto recipes and some other recipes online. So that's something that folks could Google.
So if you find it in the wild, we really encourage you to pick it and even use it and eat it, but don't plant it, even if it's a garden. Is it technically an herb because it's something that smells good and it's edible?
It's a forb, and so herbs and forbs are kind of synonymous with each other. It is.
It's a type of herb.
It is.
Yeah, so don't plant it.
Do not plant it.
But if you find it, pull it.
Right. We recommend that it because it's biennial and it's usually in kind of moist areas, it's usually really easy to pull. But we recommend that if you do pull it to control it, that you bag it before you throw it away, because there may be seed pods in there. So pull it and bag it. If you find it in a place that you know has not been sprayed with herbicide, then you can take it home and eat it, but make sure that you wash it off.
All right, good to know. So it's kind of a little bit of a value there.
Right.
Another big problem we've had we've seen it literally come into Missouri and spread through the entire state is the emerald ash borer, or EAB. Tell us about this tiny little beetle that's doing huge damage.
That's exactly right. It's an invasive beetle. It first came to the U.S. in 2002, and we discovered it in Missouri in 2008. And
so it kind of followed that progression we saw earlier, where it arrives and we can't really detect it until years later.
Right. We can be told that certain states away have it, and we can keep our eyes peeled and bet that it's coming.
Right.
Right. And so we were monitoring for it. And over the past few years, we kept pretty close track of which counties we were finding it in. And unfortunately, now it is in every county of Missouri.
Right. And there's a close-up of what the mature beetle looks like with that metallic iridescence. In the top right, it shows the beetle on a penny.
Right.
So they're really little.
They are, but
they do huge damage. Right. So let's see kind of how that damage happens. They only affect ash trees, hence their name.
Right.
And they pretty much kill and just decimate ash trees in their path.
They do. They will burrow into the bark. They leave a D-shaped hole when they work their way in there, and that's one way that you can identify that you've got emerald ash borer problems. the result of them burrowing in is they will lay their eggs, and the larva will hatch and feed on the inside of the bark, which damages the process of the tree and slowly but eventually kills the tree.
Right, so those tunnels, those little channels that we see in the lower left, that's what the larvae does. It eats through the living, is that the cambium layer?
Yes.
So it eats through the living part of the tree, which causes the tree to get stressed out and eventually die. And you mentioned the blonding, which we could see those other pictures. At this point, it's pretty much too late, isn't it?
Usually, yes. The blonding indicates that woodpeckers have pecked at the bark to get at the larvae under the bark, and it's a sign that your tree is really suffering.
Right. So unfortunately, with this situation, once you see damage, it's too late, and that ash tree is done.
Probably a goner.
Right. But if you have ash trees on your property and you don't see any of this, then it's a good time to perhaps prevent it by treating it and contacting
An arborist,
an
or a
arborist.
landscaping company. It's a big decision if you want to save an ash tree that's not already affected, because it will cost money and it will have to be probably repeated.
Right, so they can treat it with an insecticide,
Right.
but that's expensive, and like you said, multiple applications.
Right. But it is a choice as a homeowner that you could save some ash trees if you wanted to do so.
Right, okay. And then another emerging invasive. This is one of those that's maybe a little on that early detection. So look for this, folks. It's Japanese stilt grass.
Right. It's came into the US in Tennessee, and over the last few years, it's been spreading out of Tennessee towards us. We do have it in the Ozark region in quite a few places. And so I think folks are going to start seeing it moving north through the state. It's an annual grass, which means it only grows 1 year. And those always have weak roots. They don't invest in a big root system because they're not going to reuse those next year.
But they also produce seeds that grow next year.
Correct.
So just because it's an annual doesn't mean it will go away.
Right. If it's an annual, it means it's easy to pull, but it will make prolific seeds, and the population will continue to grow year after year.
And this spreads mostly through seeds.
It does.
As a grass.
Primarily through seeds.
Okay.
The easiest way to identify it is that the leaves shown in the upper left-hand corner are kind of lopsided leaves. They're not symmetrical, and they will always have kind of a shiny vein right up the middle that's actually little silvery hairs. But that lopsided look in the silvery hairs are a good indication that you may be dealing with Japanese stilt grass. And if it looks like the lower picture where that is the only plant growing there, it's almost guaranteed that you're dealing with Japanese stilt grass.
And again, that's the result where this invasive species will take over a woodland in this case, outcompete any natives. Wildlife's not really eating it.
It is not forage for any wildlife.
So again, what can we do? Prevention's always key.
Yep, clean off your stuff. Those seeds can be hiding in the dirt anywhere. The other thing besides hand pulling is that you can try to mow it before it sets seed. It'll probably set seed around August. So if you know you have it, I would start mowing it in June and July, and it will try to go to seed again. So you're going to have to be persistent, but you could keep it from going to seed, and then the population would eventually get smaller.
Okay, so we see in the lower left, that's the seed heads. So again, they're little, and even if you're cycling through an area, you may not realize that you have some of these seeds in your tires or things, which we really emphasize. Kick your tires, shake things out, make sure you get rid of the dirt that could contain these seeds.
Yep.
And this is an aquatic invader, another plant, hydrilla.
Yes, this is one of those that came in the aquarium trade. Folks put them in their aquarium as decorative plants, and unfortunately, they are very good at taking over lakes.
Right, so again, they're not native. I think they originated again in Asia or somewhere. They were brought over as a great plant for aquariums.
Mm-hmm.
However, unfortunately, some people dump their aquariums, which we really encourage you not to. That's how this came to be such a problem, we believe, right?
Yes.
So as a result of dumping aquariums, this is a problem. Hence, folks, do not dump your aquariums into any river, stream, or anything like that.
And don't flush them either.
And don't flush them, because they could eventually make their way into a waterway.
Exactly.
Right, so hydrilla. It looks kind of pretty, and in an aquarium it's pretty, but it becomes a nightmare.
It will choke out a lake, and those dense patches will ruin recreation opportunities.
I mean, that's an oar
That's
for a
like a
canoe.
kayak paddle, and that's
Yeah.
something I don't want to kayak through, drag my boat through. I certainly don't want to swim in that stuff.
Can't
And
really fish in it.
fishing, water skiing, tubing, all of that would be ruined by a dense population of hydrilla.
And it just like literally takes over the entire surface, right?
It does.
And that puts, again, municipal water sources are at risk because it could clog all of that. And it's not just that lower picture. Is that a trailer?
It is. That's a boat trailer, the brake light on a boat trailer. And they probably pulled out of a boat launch that had hydrilla, and a piece of that plant got stuck on the trailer. And if that boat were to launch in some water before the plant desiccated or dried out and died, that trailer would be transporting that plant, which could be reproductive, and start the whole process over in a new water body.
Right. So again, folks.
Clean, drain, dry.
Yes.
And that includes removing any plant fragments from boats, equipment, and trailers. And once again, just don't dump or flush aquarium plants or animals.
All right, this is what we can do. So there's a look-alike in Missouri, and that's, we get a lot of calls and questions from people saying, is that hydrilla? And when it's not.
Right. I think this is a native species that would be most easily confused for hydrilla. And I wanted to show these photos so that people could kind of compare the structure here. Coontail, also known as hornwort, is a native, but it's aggressive, like we talked about in our definitions. It can be aggressive, and so people will see large populations of it some places. But the leaves are needle-like and thin, and it branches off the main stem differently. It actually branches off the main stem and then branches again, whereas hydrilla in the upper right will have leaves that are whorled kind of in a spiral around the stem, but they won't branch into multiple more branching areas. It will branch at the top, but it's going to have those wider kind of spiny leaves that are not thin needle-like.
Okay, and this is another opportunity for really folks to educate themselves a bit more after this. Go online, visit us at mdc.mo.gov. We have information on that to really get a better idea of the difference between the coontail and the hydrilla. Right. And again, great questions, folks. Keep them coming. And if you have them, put them in the chat box and we'll get to them as we can. And here's one that we're seeing this time of year in particular. Now, Missouri's home to some really beautiful native honeysuckles, and you can buy some honeysuckles at your nurseries and big box stores that aren't a problem, but this is a big problem. It's the bush honeysuckle.
Yes, bush honeysuckle has been widely sold as an ornamental. And bush honeysuckle is a shrub that gets 15 to 20 feet tall. The flowers on this non-native honeysuckle are white and then changing to yellow, and they will produce bright red juicy berries. And a good way to verify that you're dealing with the invasive is to snap off a twig, and if it is an invasive bush honeysuckle, those twigs will be hollow,
as we see in that picture. And then you mentioned those red berries it produces, and folks may think, well, that's good food for birds and stuff, but it's really not.
Correct. The birds will eat them, but the nutritional value on those berries is very low. It lacks the proteins and the fats that our birds really need, and instead it's more of a diuretic, so it helps the birds plant more quickly.
Right, but it also then dehydrates the birds, and that weakens them, and it's not a good food.
No, it's a junk food for birds, and so we could provide so much better if we planted natives.
All right, and also bush honeysuckle, you said, and I've seen this in my neighborhood, and it literally takes over lots and gets huge. And you said 15, 20 feet. It's a vine, so it can grow up other trees, poles, things like that.
Well, we have Japanese honeysuckle, which is the invasive vine version.
And it's also an invasive though, right? Yes. And it just takes over a whole area. Folks, we would have lightened this picture more, but we can't because the honeysuckle has shaded out all the natives on the forest floor here. So again, tell us more about it.
Again, as far as the birds go, if they're tempted to nest in the lower branches of these really thick patches of bush honeysuckle, they're more prone to predation because they're closer to the ground, which means they're at another disadvantage, right?
And we mentioned the berries are literally junk food for birds, so that
Right.
doesn't serve a purpose.
Correct.
So bush honeysuckle, what can we do to combat this, especially this time of year?
Well, in this time of year, I don't think I mentioned, they are leafing out. If you see leaves popping off of trees or growing on especially small bushes right now, the likelihood that it's bush honeysuckle is large. And so it's a great time to notice which species are the bush honeysuckle. You can treat them now, or you can mark them to treat them later. We've got great information on treatment methods on our website. And the small plants can be pulled and dug up. When they get bigger, they really need to be cut and the stumps need to be sprayed so that they are not re-sprouting on you. But we encourage folks to treat these year round if possible.
Okay, and I'm glad you mentioned that point because someone just asked, they were told that if they won't regrow from the roots in the ground as long as you cut the stump. And that's not true. You need to not only cut the stump, but you need to treat it with an herbicide because they can re-sprout from that.
I believe that they can and will. And so herbicide helps make sure that the work you did when you cut it down is actually effective.
Right, and another, again, it seems pretty simple, but if smaller plants, pulling them, digging them out, getting rid of not just the plant, but most of those roots, that will be real key in helping to curb it and stop its spread.
Right.
And as always, don't buy it. When you go to the store and you want some honeysuckle because it smells great, find native, non-invasive varieties of honeysuckle.
Yes.
All right. And now we get to literally a big problem because these hogs get big and they weren't always here. They got here because folks released them to hunt them. And now we have a huge problem. So let's talk about feral hogs.
Okay. Well, feral hogs, I think, have been on Missouri's landscape since folks had them free range on their farms. But most of those folks kept pretty good track of their livestock because they depended on them. Agricultural hogs that got loose and became feral then were hunted. And excuse me, it became popular. Many states hunting feral hogs is popular, but it's important to note that feral hogs are not wildlife. They're invasive, non-native, destructive species. And in Missouri, a feral hog is defined as any swine that's born, living, or has lived in the wild, and the offspring of such swine. And they pose a danger to humans. They can carry over 50 diseases. They are massive destructors of property, both agricultural and just private lands of any kind. And then they also, because they eat, wallow, and travel so far, destroy a lot of natural resources.
Right. So a sounder is what a group of feral hogs is called.
It is, yes.
And a sounder could go into a crop field and just destroy acres upon acres in a single evening.
Yes.
They can go into woodlands and wallow in sensitive areas. They eat just about anything, including ground nesting birds, their eggs, even fawn, a lot of plants and things, and they get huge.
They get huge and they reproduce.
And they reproduce
quickly.
rapidly. And these are not your farmyard pigs that just got out to play. These are swine that have been really interbred with boars and like wild pigs over time. So they are a big threat. And somebody's asking if we could hunt them. We mentioned hunting's part of the problem, why they got to be a problem.
We'll address the hunting question in the next slide.
All right.
I want to feature the Missouri Feral Hog Elimination Partnership because this is a massive undertaking that 15 different agencies and organizations across the state have partnered together with the goal of eliminating feral hogs from the state. And this partnership has hired full-time trappers, and they also utilize other technology like helicopters and drones for eliminating hogs in really remote areas.
So we've been working with our partner agencies, and it's it's having a positive effect. Folks, I just want to jump in and say thank you. It's 1 o'clock. We are going to go a few minutes over here, so please stick with us if you can. We're going to talk more about feral hogs and some other stuff. So as we go. So this slide, quickly here, this is the southern half of Missouri. And what is this showing?
This is showing that the Feral Hog Elimination Partnership is being effective. All of the areas in a light blue are watersheds that were occupied by feral hogs in 2016. We knew they were there. And the areas in the pinkish orange are watersheds where we know we still have feral hogs. But when we do the math on the acreage between the original blue watersheds and the current orange watersheds, we show that we've got a 56% reduction in the acres of Missouri landscape that are occupied by feral hogs, which means that our partnership efforts are being effective.
Okay, so yeah, the takeaway here, it's working.
Yes.
So we've eliminated feral hogs in a lot of areas. There's a lot of work still to do.
There is.
But one of the odd things is these trappers and folks are shooting fewer hogs, which is a good sign that there are fewer hogs out there to shoot.
That's correct. We have more trappers that are getting more efficient with their trapping methods, and we are trapping fewer the last few years, which indicates to us that there are fewer hogs out there to trap.
All right, and folks, somebody asked about, can you hunt them? Well, we know that it is prohibited on conservation areas and other lands owned or leased or managed by the Department of Conservation. So you cannot hunt them on conservation lands.
You can also not hunt them on national forest or national park lands in Missouri, and I believe you cannot also on Army Corps of Engineer lands.
Right. You can hunt them, however, on private property, but we really strongly discourage that because what we found here and in other states that the culture of hog hunting leads to more hogs to hunt. It's just that simple. So we strongly discourage it. And if you need help with feral hogs or see feral hogs, call this number to report them.
Yes.
All right. So we've covered a lot of stuff. We also have a lot more information on our website. So what could folks do to learn more?
We do. If they go to the website listed at the bottom of the screen, they will find that we've got invasive and nuisance species pages, which feature animals and plants. And with the plants, we go into more detail on treatment methods and options for eradicating those species. And so I highly recommend folks who are interested in taking action that they check out these pages so that they do it efficiently and safely.
All right, folks, and it's as simple as visiting us online at mdc.mo.gov. You could use our search function and just search invasive and nuisance species, or if you want more information on a specific species, use our search button, and there's a lot there for you. So again, this is Joe Jarek, your host, and
Angela Sokolowski,
our guest expert today. So thank you again for being with us.
Thanks, Joe. It was fun.
And thank you, folks, for some really great questions. This webcast will be posted on our website. Give us a couple of days. So if somebody missed it, they could still watch it. And again, just go to mdc.mo.gov and you could search wild webcasts. And you could also see other webcasts we've done on everything from strange but true animals and plants to black bears to pollinators and garden planting. It's a whole host of stuff. So again, thanks for joining us today. We encourage you to get outside and discover nature, and have a great day.